Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I've prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. When the king came to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe and said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" This is the gospel of the Lord. Grace to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Jesus was doing so well, wasn't he? The story was moving along so nicely. We heard this beautiful passage from Isaiah about this feast that is to come where everybody is included. We've heard this psalm from our memory that many of us could probably recite by heart about God being with us and through all the thick and thin of everything, and a banquet laid out even in the midst of our enemies, and being welcomed in the house of God forever. We heard this beautiful passage from Philippians about rejoicing and the peace of God surpassing understanding. Even this story, it starts out okay, right? This king is having a wedding banquet and invites guests to come. Some of them don't come, some of them get roughed up a little bit, but in the end, everyone is invited. It's great. Till the end. Till the end. This one guy who's not wearing the wedding robe, who gets bound hand and foot and cast into the outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't know about you, but that seems to draw my attention. And I start to think to myself, uh-oh, I hope that's not me. This is a parable about judgment as much as it is about being welcomed into the feast of God. And it's troubling. I read this article by a guy named, I keep forgetting his name, Chris Hoke, who did a Bible study with some inmates on this passage. It was a couple of years ago. And what happens is he starts describing the pieces of the story. So there's this king who has the wedding feast. Okay, yeah, we get that. And who are the first people invited? They're kind of the well-connected people, the wealthy people, the people of influence. Yeah, that sounds like the same old story to me. Some of the servants who go out to remind them of the invitation, they get sent back, some of them get beat up, some of them get killed. That piqued their interest. Then the king gets upset and retaliates, basically. Sends out forces to destroy the city. And then sends more servants out to invite everyone, both good and bad. And the inmates said, "You mean even people like us?" Yeah. Everyone. The good and the bad. And then there's the ending. No wedding robe. Thrown into the outer darkness. And the reaction was, why would you invite us to this party if you're only going to humiliate us and throw us out at the end? And at least when I read it, I wonder the same question, right? It's, what is this about? How do I know if I'm wearing the right thing? How do I know if I'm good enough to get in? How do I know if I'm worthy? Maybe you've had the same reaction. I don't want to get thrown out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth any more than you do. What's it mean to get thrown out? I wondered about what it meant to dress right for this, that maybe it really is a question of that. So maybe you saw it. I did a little cute video this week of getting dressed up for a variety of different parties. A pool party, a party with the neighbors, my Martin Luther outfit for the Reformation party we're going to have. Of course, it's not really about any of those superficial things. My favorite moment was when I came out in my church robe and Joe just said, no, definitely not. So I looked it up. Sometimes other scriptures can help us out. So I looked to, let's find the first one first here. I looked to Galatians, where Paul said to that community, as many as you have been baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. He said, okay, good. That makes me feel a little bit better. Get your Jesus on. We've been washed in the water. We've been joined to his life and his death and his resurrection. We live together as the church. Is that what it means for us to get to be dressed up and ready to go for the party? I hope so. But I don't know about you, I still get a little bit worried. Am I worthy enough? Have I dressed up enough? I got a tie on today. I did do that. I looked to another place, Colossians, which is also a good verse. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against one another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. I like those things. Compassion, meekness, humility, kindness, patience, and forgiveness. Aha! Isn't that what it's all about? To be wrapped up in the forgiveness of Jesus. I think at times we throw out each other. This story kind of reminds me of that too. But sometimes we're all too eager to cast those out around us. Our civil discourse seems to be anything but civil or discourse as of late, if you haven't noticed. And we tend to blame each other for just about everything, and it seems as though, at least in our world beyond these walls, we blame the most vulnerable among us for all of our problems. It's easy to see how people feel like they are thrown out into the outer darkness. Why invite me if you're just going to throw me out and humiliate me? Have you ever felt like that? Places where you've been thrown out or humiliated. And what might these things, to be dressed in compassion and meekness and kindness and patience and forgiveness, be wrapped up in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that our baptism gives us? What might that have to say to those situations? I was remembering back a number of years ago. It was when I was first a pastor. I had hair then. I was at my first church in South Dakota. And it was, I was there for a few months. I was excited. I was eager to be there. I loved the people. They were great. I got to learn to do new things like ride horses. I had never done that before. And just kind of be part and immersed in a totally different culture, really, out west. It was kind of neat. But then the church started to fight because they have these rules in place where like former pastors aren't supposed to come back. I think I was a case study for why that's a good idea because it divided the people and it became this who are you aligned to nonsense that got everybody up in a roar, and I felt like I was in the middle and wasn't quite sure what to do about it, how to navigate that. And we worked on stuff for a while. And then it was time for me to leave. And even though things had been hostile for some time, and even though we had to work through a number of issues, there was this kind of relief in the air. And we all knew we were moving on to the next phase. We got to show each other some compassion and kindness and meekness and humility and patience, and even some forgiveness. And then I needed to go to our synod office, which is kind of in charge of all the churches in that region, to have an exit interview with the synod staff, the bishop and the staff. And so I sat in the office and answered their questions and went through the whole rigmarole, and it was fine. And then we got to the end of the meeting, and it was time to leave, and we all stood up to say goodbye and shake each other's hand. And one of the associates to the bishop shook my hand and said, "You know, we never thought you'd last there that long." I did not exhibit compassion, kindness, humility, or any of those things. I wanted to clock this guy as hard as I could. I didn't, but I really wanted to. I felt like I was thrown out into the outer darkness, to a point that even though I had moved on and had a great next call, it was a couple of years, I think, before I kind of worked through some of that. And then we had gone back out west on vacation, and one of the things that was on our list was to go back to that area. We were going to see Mount Rushmore on the way to other things out west, and thought, okay, this could be kind of fun. Let's go back. We could see a few people that we knew, and check out the church and see our old house and stuff like that. So we did that, and we ran into one of our favorite people. And she was showing us around the church because we had done some renovation projects when I was there, but they had continued it after I had left. It was very, very nicely done. And as we were parting ways, she said, we've learned a lot since you were here. And I said, I've learned a lot too. And we shared this just beautiful embrace that I still cherish. This whole forgiveness piece about being wrapped up in the life and death of Jesus Christ and his resurrection and the life we live together, as messy as that gets sometimes. This story, it's interesting because it's right near the end. It's right before Jesus himself will go to the cross in just a couple of days after this parable. And if you read into it another way, you could say that it's right before he's cast out into the darkness. And yet we know where the story goes. It's about forgiveness. It's about life. It's about resurrection, right? And the story is actually about the party. It's about the wedding feast. It's the image of what it means to be the people of God in the world. And yes, Jesus is arguing with his sharpest critics. Who are those who were invited first? Well, he's talking to the religious authorities. And guess what, guys? You kind of blew it. But God keeps inviting, and keeps inviting, and keeps inviting. The good and the bad. But we worry about being this last guy, don't we? I still worry about it. What's it about? So here's the thing I learned that was interesting. If you had a wedding party like this and you invited people to come, there was the expectation that you would dress properly. Just like, if you go to some kind of a fancy event, there's usually an expectation that you dress well for that as well. I guess that hasn't changed much. But what was different about it was that if you came and you didn't have a wedding garment, the host would provide you with one. So what is happening with this guy? He's been given the garment. He's been given the invitation. If he was one of those inmates sitting around the Bible study, he's been given parole. And he won't take it. Or maybe he thinks he knows better. Or who knows? Maybe he's angry about something. Maybe he's carrying around resentment. Maybe he just wants to show him. Who knows? But what does it mean for us? We've been given the garment. We've been given the gift. We've been given lives to lead in compassion and kindness and meekness and patience and forgiveness. We have those moments in our lives where we don't live up to those expectations and we worry about getting thrown out. We all do that, right? Had those moments where we don't treat each other the way we should. We all do that too. And yet the garment is still there for you to put on, to come to the party, to leave your resentment and anger and feeling left behind or left out or not listened to or whatever it is at the door. To come in, to party, to rejoice, to grab some food and celebrate.